In 1931, a fishing trawler 25 miles off the English coast pulled up a weapon carved 14,000 years ago. It came from the bottom of the North Sea, buried inside ancient peat, a barbed hunting point of red deer antler. The trawler was called the Colinda. Her skipper, Pilgrim Lockwood, was breaking up a lump of seabed peat with a shovel. Fishermen called that peat moorlog, and they hated it. It fouled their nets whenever they fished these shallow banks off Norfolk. But this lump rang strangely under the blade. Lockwood split it open and found 8.5 inches of carved antler. Every barb was still sharp. The point looked freshly finished, sealed inside the peat like a letter nobody had ever opened. Here is the problem. Antler points are made by hunters on land for spearing fish in rivers and game in forests. This one rose from open water, 25 miles from the nearest coast, under 120 feet of gray sea. Scientists later dated it to nearly 12,000 years before Christ, older than farming, older than pottery, older than any pyramid. Somewhere below the fishing boats lay the river where a hunter lost his spear. The river, the forest, the hunter drowned. 20,000 years ago, that sea did not exist. The last ice age had locked enormous volumes of water inside glaciers. Where the North Sea rolls today stretched a country of hills, rivers, marshes, and lagoons. Scientists now call it Doggerland. It was never a narrow land bridge between Britain and Europe. It was a whole living country, the heart of a continent. 18,500 years, today's a world to Aliadend, and hope of the legators turns weight sevenants toward crown starful. Around 14,000 years ago, the glaciers retreated and the bare tundra bloomed. Birch and pine forests marched across the plain. 2,000 years later, oak and elm joined the canopy. The DNA of those forests still sleeps beneath the seabed today. Picture gently sloping hills, heavily wooded valleys, and swampy lagoons alive with birds. Archaeologists have called it a Mesolithic paradise. And it was full of people. Researchers believe at least 10,000 hunter-gatherers once called this vanished country their home. They moved with the seasons, spearing river fish, hunting forest game, gathering hazelnuts and berries along the edges of warm lagoons. We know them by what the seabed kept: harpoons, tools, and human footprints, one preserved trail holding 39 separate prints. For thousands of years, this was home. But the same melting ice that built their paradise had already signed its death warrant. All that meltwater had to go somewhere. As the glaciers died, the world's oceans rose 1 to 2 meters every century. That sounds harmless, barely 2 centimeters a year. No single morning ever looked different from the last. The land felt eternal. But a grandmother could stand on a shoreline and tell her grandchildren the water now covered meadows where she had played. Every generation, the camps moved a little higher. Excelachestorians. Every generation, the salt crept further up the rivers and into the forests. The rising water drowned the woodlands from below. Oak and elm gave way to marsh, then mud flats, then open gray water. By around 9,000 BCE, the sea had bitten an enormous tidal bay into the plains between England and the higher ground. That higher ground carries a name we still use: Dogger Bank. Today a shallow fishing ground, back then a country's last hills. Families who had once walked from what is now Holland to what is now England found their old paths ending in water. Leader exacerbated. Then the rise accelerated. Within a few centuries, the bay widened into a strait, and the strait became an impassable sea. Britain, for the first time in its human story, became an island, and everyone left in Doggerland was trapped on shrinking ground. What had been a country was now Dogger Island, a lonely stretch of hills ringed by water, still home to stubborn families. They adapted, as their ancestors always had, fishing the encroaching waters, hunting what game remained, gathering hazelnuts on the high ground. And it worked. The island stayed alive above the waves for thousands of years. Mother Miss Moment lived in islandry, its people outlasting the country that raised them. But the greatest danger was not the slow water rising around their shores. It waited hundreds of miles away, in darkness. Off the coast of southern Norway, the edge of the continental shelf sagged under thousands of years of piled glacial sediment. Around 8,200 years ago, that edge let go, the largest known underwater landslide since the Ice Age ended. A stretch of seabed roughly the size of Scotland tore loose, sending 3,200 cubic kilometers of sediment downslope. The ocean above collapsed into the void, then recoiled. A great wave began to spread outward in every direction at once. Geologists would one day name it the Storegga Slide. The people living on the North Sea coasts had no name for it. The wave crossed open water toward Scotland, toward Shetland, and toward the Low Islands, where Doggerland's last people still made their lives. In the Shetland Isles, the water ran 20 meters up the land, a 6-story building of black sea pushing suddenly inland. Along the Scottish mainland, it still stood several meters tall. The sand it threw ashore lies buried in coastal soil today. Some researchers estimate the wave reached 25 meters in places, more than 80 feet of seawater, arriving without any warning. On low islands, survival came down to luck and elevation. Old Doggerland by then had precious little elevation left to offer. One estimate holds that a quarter of Britain's Mesolithic population died in that single event. One wave took one person in 4. For decades, the story was told simply. The Storegga tsunami was the day Doggerland finally drowned. The truth is stranger. Recent research shows the sea had already taken most of the country, slowly, patiently, across 100 generations of steady rise. By the morning the wave arrived, Doggerland was already an archipelago, and astonishingly, parts of it survived the tsunami itself. The great wave passed over some islands and left them standing. The true ending came afterward, quietly, as the water kept climbing. The last hills may have held on 1,000 years more. Then the North Sea closed over them, without a sound. And then the world forgot. No map recorded Doggerland. No legend reliably remembered it. Only fishermen kept noticing something strange below. For decades before the Colinda sailed, trawlers had been hauling up mammoth bones from the shallow banks. Bones of animals that never swim. Then came Lockwood's Antler Point in 1931. The following year, scientists examined the block of peat that had held it. The pollen inside had formed in a freshwater marsh, despite lying 120 feet beneath salt water, dry land, drought. It was proof at last that the seabed had once been living country, but drawing its actual map took another 90 years. In 2015, a project called Europe's Lost Frontiers began turning seismic survey data into true topographic maps of the vanished landscape. From seabed sediment cores, researchers pulled ancient DNA, and the drowned forests answered, sporch, then pine, then oak. In 2025, scientists released an interactive reconstruction of Doggerland's entire life, from Ice Age plain to open sea, 20,000 years. Every coastline you have ever stood on is temporary. The people of Doggerland learned that truth 2 centimeters at a time. And this is not history's only warning. In the year 536, the sun itself went out. That story comes next.